Switch up.
Okay, we are live for our March chapter meeting. The Surfrider chapters, Long Beach, Huntington Beach, Seal Beach, Newport Beach, and South Orange County. And we're hosted tonight with a lot of help from Bill Hickman, who is our regional Southern California chapter manager, and he oversees all of our Southern California chapters from Santa Barbara all the way down the coast to the Tijuana border. So he stays quite busy with our chapters. We crafted this meeting tonight to focus on Orange County and what's going on in Orange County with community choice and also, you know, overreaching our umbrella of climate change and what our chapters have been working on, you know, to support initiatives that fall under climate change and getting to 100% renewables. So tonight, our panel is going to cover climate realities, local and regional issues such as sea level rise, flooding, beach erosion, why CCE, why is it a great program to help us get to those 100% renewables, justice and inclusion, and equity impacts, etc. So that said, I just want to give a little top line update from headquarters and from our chapters, what we've been working on. We just finished a couple weeks ago a very successful Hill Day, and as everyone probably knows, and if you didn't know, we do quite a lot of legislative activism, from local, you know, ordinances and initiatives to regional, to Sacramento, all the way up to federal. And so this year we had our annual Hill Day. It was virtual again this year. And there's pros and cons with that. The pro is we are working virtual and we tend to get a lot more volunteers that can opt in and don't travel to Washington. And the con is you don't get to go to Washington, DC and, you know, and shake hands and meet face to face with our legislators, which we like to do because Surfriders Coalition is, you know, some of our corporate members are coastal defender companies, and it's also our chapter leadership and our chapter volunteers, some that just do, you know, a beach clean or two, some that are chapter leads for campaigns, and some staff like myself and Bill Hickman. So this year in 2022, all of our chapters, our Southern California chapters that are on tonight, that I mentioned, they all had lead working groups. And we had over 165 attendees total over our 82 chapter network. 70 chapters and clubs participated, and we had 145 meetings, from White House meetings on down to key committees, the Hill and the Senate. So we're thankful of that. We're moving into next week on the 29th, I believe, is our Oceans Day during our all staff meetings, but our Oceans Day is Sacramento, and you know, we too have over 100 meetings scheduled and that many volunteers. Usually our working groups are 4 or 5 people that, you know, meet with our legislators, and we, you know, top line what our federal, what our state, and what our local concerns are, and how that translates to taking action in the legislative form. So tonight I'd like to introduce 3 of our esteemed speakers. Linda Kraemer from Climate Reality Project, Orange County. She will be our first speaker. And then we have Ayn Craciun. She is with the Climate Action Campaign, also Orange County. And then rounding out, when we're still waiting for, oh, Dan's on. Hi, Dan. How are you? We have Dan Kalmick, who is an alternate on the OC Power Authority, but he also is a lead and a city councilman from Huntington Beach, you know, who has been very active in getting Huntington to vote in and opt in to, you know, Joint Powers Authority scenario and what that would look like for Huntington Beach. And we, Surfrider Foundation and our chapters have worked with a number of coalition partners, primarily with Linda and Ayn leading, and then with our local leadership in our city councils to get them onboarded and educated on community choice and how that meets or helps us meet initiatives on renewable energy and getting, and getting to carbon neutral or carbon reductions in the environment. All of these things that are affecting, us in real day and real time with, climate issues that we are impacted with in Southern California, in the United States, and throughout the world. So with that, I would like to just go over a couple of housekeeping notes. We are videotaping this. You have an opt-in on your screen to opt in or opt out to being videotaped. And we ask that everyone stays on mute until our presentations are concluded. And then we will allot 10 to 15 minutes for each speaker, but we also want to be generous about our Q&A because there are a lot of questions that are always asked, and there's a lot of new updates that our panelists are going to go over tonight that we've allotted 20 to 25 minutes or so for Q&A at the end of the chapter meeting. So with that, I am going to turn over the program to Linda. You are up first, correct?
Yes, I'm up first.
Perfect.
Can you hear me now?
All right, I can hear you now. Thank you, Linda.
Okay. Can I don't know, if I can share. I'm trying to share.
Yeah, we added you as co-host. So do you see the green share screen button?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Everybody see that?
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Just maximize it or make it presenter view, and that'd be perfect.
Okay. So I'm going to let you know, I was asked to speak a little bit about climate change, a little bit about local action, local impacts, and then CCA. And so I'm going to rush through some of this, but some of my Climate Reality members are also on the call, and we'll be putting links in the chat. And I want to let you know at any time, if there's anything you missed or reference you need, just please email us at climaterealityprojectoc@gmail.com, and we'll have all those numbers here for you. So I'm going to go ahead and set my timer. All right. So I'm Linda Kramer. I'm the chapter chair of Climate Reality. And I'm also the team lead on our city action, city action and community choice team. So I'm sorry, let me make this a slideshow. Okay. Okay. So like I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about local action. Before I start, I want to just do a land acknowledgement to the Tongva, Keech, and Ahashiman that occupied the land that is now Orange County before us. That's from Fairview Park. I'm going to talk a little bit about our chapter. So we've been busy, and we have some wonderful people working for us. And we are the chapter, Al Gore chapter of Orange County, but worldwide we have about 40,000 members, and we stay busy. So we've in the past been very active tabling and out in the community, but because of COVID, most of our stuff is online, but we are coming back. And so we're going to be tabling for Earth Day and other actions. And we have a lot of fun. And we also support the Greta Thunberg Fridays for Future efforts. Our youth action team in this bottom corner is organizing a strike, which the next general strike is this Friday. There's one in the city of Orange and the one in the city of Anaheim. And it's a really great way to come out and meet a bunch of great youth and people and be involved. So the link reformandsustain.org is the easiest way to find out about those events. So we also have a policy chair, Lisa Swanson, who's also a member of Surfriders, and we have 5 priority bills we work on as a chapter, and you can see a few of them here that are really important to us: offshore drilling, Poseidon, stopping Poseidon, and saving California solar. We have an art and entertainment chair who works with the Laguna Beach Cultural Arts Center. We're going to be having Wednesday night climate change movies for Earth Month, and we're also going to be doing a music poetry night. So if you're interested, you can contact us and ask to speak to Danny Gray at climaterealityprojectoc@gmail.com. And then we also, on our website, we have an events page. If you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you can find as much as you want about ways to reduce your carbon footprint, all kinds of helpful lists, and we'll be updating our Earth Day events and actions. So if you want to email us with an event you have, we'll be happy to add it to the list. There also is a climate reality training coming up in person in August. It's free, and it's with science experts all over the world and Al Gore, and you can sign up for that. The deadline is April 20th to sign up for that. So I'm just gonna, I know most of us have talked about climate change. I'm not gonna talk a lot about it, but I do like to show my favorite graph. So on the top, the blue line is CO2 in our very thin atmosphere, and on the bottom is temperature and how it matches it. This is 800,000 years of ice core samples. And if you can see on the right, this number, we've never gone above 300,000 as in our modern human lifetime, but now we are all the way up to 420 parts per million, and that is causing our temperature rise. And unfortunately, we're still emitting a lot of fossil fuel emissions. 2021 was the highest year. And it's heating our oceans at a crazy amount. And in the last 20 years, it's just exceeded the predictions. So it's also melting ice, and melting ice on land in places like Greenland contributes to sea level rise more than even just melting ice. So, and then we all know we had a really hot summer last summer, and by all accounts, it looks like we're going to have another hot summer. And so this was record-breaking heat in the Pacific Northwest. Extreme weather events happen, but extreme weather events are increasing every year, and they are causing damage as we get hotter. So I had to show this. This was a text I received from Margot in our group. Her HOA insurance was canceled after the last Laguna fire. And they're going to be paying $1,000 more per year to purchase another insurance. So it's hitting us in our pocketbook. And this is local, how it's affecting our local beaches. These are the most threatened beaches. And you can see at the top that many of them, San Diego beaches, Capo Beach, Dana Point, they are the most at risk in terms of erosion. This is something I do. I know it's a little morbid, but I try to keep track of the loss of life and extreme weather events. And these are just a few. This is what keeps me going and motivated and centered. Just a few last summer, and even January and February of this year, there was an unusual snowstorm. 22 tourists despite government warnings, they went to see the snow, and they got trapped in their cars because they're not used to it. And so a lot of loss. For the first time ever, we had a heat event in both the South and the North Pole. They're opposite seasons, and it shouldn't happen, but it did happen. This was on March 18th, a few days ago. So Capistrano Beach, this is from one of our members, Danny Gray, and Denise has sent us some great photos in the flyer, is losing its beaches. And you can see what great pictures. In 2018, I was at a Newport Beach Rise Up Newport meeting, and people from UCI, Flood Rise, and city staff were there presenting that the 9-inch walls that Newport Beach has were not good enough, and they were talking about raising them to 13 inches. And they were talking of this very low numbers of $500 to $1 million to make that happen. And that's not talking about groundwater extraction and all the other things they needed to do. They even were talking about raising the sidewalks. It's very important to know and understand that the Coastal Commission does not want hard structures put in because it ruins our beaches. It takes away our sand. So instead, they are recommending other things like natural barriers. And so this is a natural barrier, sandbags and pebbles in Dana Point. And but that we all know that's not gonna last. So as the oceans warm, animals move. I think I might talk about the latest assessment where they say 70% of animals have already moved, migrated as things heat up. One of the theories behind losing dolphins is that they're not getting the nutrition because their food sources are moving. So this isn't my favorite slide. It's my favorite joke is what if it's a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? And the good news is that solar panels and renewables are crashing in price exponentially. The business is there for them. I think it's important to show this slide that shows the cumulative CO2. That means CO2 lasts for 100 to 300 years in the atmosphere. And cumulatively speaking, the United States has the most in there. China is catching up. Brazil, because the green is land use, is on its way. Cities are where 75% of our emissions happen. And city action is what is so many of us are focused on because we see that we can really move the needle there. In Orange County right now, there is not one climate action plan that would get a passing grade in meeting the terms for the Paris Agreement. And some essential things are that you have a separate climate action plan that's tied to the general plan, that you have measures and targets, and it's legally binding. So this slide, I think, is very important. This is the city of San Diego. They're doing pretty well with their plan. And one of the things that first got me interested in community choice energy was looking at these numbers. If you see in green, by 2035, the difference in savings in CO2, and they have 50% renewables, it's just phenomenal. So what is community choice energy? Community choice energy is when currently we only have one choice, our investor-owned utility, and they buy and deliver our energy. Well, many cities in California for 10 years now have decided the legislation changed, and they can now purchase energy on their own. And then they work with the utilities and to deliver it to the customers. The money that was going to the investor-owned utility for their investors is now coming back to the CCE and put back into our communities. That money is significant. It's millions of dollars per year. So what are the benefits of community choice? We can return back to the utility anytime. It's a local voice because it's a public-private entity and they're on public record. We get competitive rates. Most of the CCAs have done that. They're buying more clean energy. It's revenue-based, no taxes. All the money that they make from the ratepayers is used to staff, and all the programs, no new taxes. It's real important to understand if you ever hear about community choice, you always have a choice. customers are never forced to stay with community choice. They can always go back to their investor-owned utility. They can opt down to the same rate, or they can opt up to a cleaner rate. And customers are very happy with that. So currently in Orange County, the OC Power Authority is our community choice agency. 4 cities braved it and launched it last year. And then the County of Orange just joined, and will start in 2023. Your choices are basically a minimum mix, 70% renewable or 100% renewable. Joint Power Authority is not unusual. It happens in California all the time. I'm going to move ahead a little bit. CCAs are tending to buy at least 10 times the amount. Probably the biggest plus of CCs is that they can choose, the cities choose where customers start. And 3 of our cities chose 100% renewable energy as the default rate for customers to start in. It is, for the average homeowner, about the price of a cup of coffee more expensive. But the good news is every customer, commercial or residential, has the option to choose the base rate, which is equal to the amount of Southern California Edison. We wrote a blog on it. It's expected to save about over 1 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. That's somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 cars off the road every year. I do a monthly CCA meeting, and would love for you to join us as we talk about next steps. Meanwhile, SCE's prices are expected to go up. CCAs are doing really inventive things like working together to have even cheaper energy rates. During COVID, because it's a local community, they use their money to help bail out small businesses. They use their money to retrain workers who had lost their jobs. And they did this repeated times. This is one of my favorite slides. Marine Clean Energy just announced that all the solar projects they buy have to be pollinator friendly for the ground cover under their solar panels. And that's going to make a huge difference. Most CCAs also try to buy in California. The most important part of community choice energy is the programs that happen with the money that comes back to them. Because they are a nonprofit, they don't keep the money, they dump it back into programs. I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to mention that building electrification programs, and for low income who have trouble buying, say, more energy efficient heaters and air conditioners and electric stoves, and then transportation, e-bikes, and resiliency, which is why we won't be Texas, because they buy battery and storage microgrids so that we're protected from having blackouts and brownouts. I'm aware we're at 15 minutes time, and I don't want to take any more time. So I'm going to go ahead and share from there. I do want to mention just one more thing real quick. Peninsula Clean Energy has a goal in 2025 for 45 electric vehicles on the road. As of June 2021, they're halfway there. That will mean approximately $50 million back into their economy, because customers, and with the incentives PCE is offering and the help to get electric cars, save 50 to 60% on their gas bills. And we know that's important right now. So I'm done, and I will stop my share. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Linda. You're always a wealth of information, and I'm always learning from you. And thank you for joining us tonight. And now we're going to turn over the podium to Ayn Craciun from Climate Action Campaign. So Ayn, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Denise. Thank you, Linda, for all that wonderful information, all your great work. So great to see what y'all are up to. So the purpose of my 10, 15 minutes here will be to explain sort of a little bit of what's going on and really how you can make a big impact on climate locally. I'll touch on some of the things Linda talked about, but I do have some different info too. So a little outline. I'm going to introduce Climate Action Campaign and myself. I'm going to talk about environmental justice issues that Denise mentioned, the need for systemic change, and then 2 big policy tools that we have in our tool bag, which are CCE, which you heard about, and then building electrification also. So, so as far as me, personal intro, I'm a mom, and creating safety is probably the defining value of my life. I had a really chaotic upbringing. I spent some time in foster care. So protecting vulnerable children and mothers is very important to me personally, and it's what brings me to the climate fight in addition to just being a mom. We know that the climate crisis is a misery multiplier, especially for vulnerable folks. So next slide. Okay, so in terms of Climate Action Campaign, oh, wait a minute, sorry, I moved too soon. So Climate Action Campaign is a community-driven, community-supported climate policy nonprofit. We have a bottom-up strategy that pilots successful policy solutions locally, creating models that can be scaled and replicated at the state and the national levels, and we've seen that happen. And I have to stop here and say that Climate Action Campaign is depends on community donations to do our work, so we appreciate any contribution you can make. You can do that at our website. Our vision is to stop the climate crisis through effective policy action and to create a replicable, scalable model for a just transition to a zero carbon future, and we do all of that through a lens of equity and justice. Fortunately, we know that the technology and the policy changes that we need are affordable and they will actually save us money. They are feasible and they are going to make us healthier, and they're available right now. And all that we need is the political will to bring them to life. So a little bit more background on CAC. We were founded in 2015 by our CEO, Nicole Caprice, who was working at that time in the San Diego mayor's office, where she wrote their groundbreaking climate action plan that Linda shared some information about a few moments ago. And what she saw was that that climate action plan was not going to get passed under that incumbent Republican administration and with the opposition of the local fossil fuel utility. So she had written that climate action plan while she was working in the mayor's office, and then she left the mayor's office and started Climate Action Campaign to secure adoption of that climate action plan by building grassroots support and forming cross-sector coalitions. And as a result of that, San Diego became the largest city in the United States at that time to make a legally binding commitment toward 100% clean electricity by 2035. They were also the first city in California to integrate equity into their climate action plan. And then since then, Climate Action Campaign has worked to successfully pass 8 other 100% clean electricity climate action plans in San Diego. And we helped the city of Irvine adopt a similar plan last year, which was a groundbreaking first for Orange County, although that plan is still in the early implementation phases, as Linda pointed out. So, and then in addition, we worked for 5 years to build the community will to create the first community choice energy program in Orange County. And then, of course, in 2020, Irvine voted to create that first CCE, and then 4 other cities voted to join them. So our theory of change is that first we build community will, and then we build political will, and then we win. And then we've seen that this absolutely works. And so we want to enable people, all of you, very importantly, to get involved, because that is what is necessary for making the kinds of changes that we need. So to that end, I'll say up front, and I'll give you more info at the end, but we recently started the Orange County Climate Coalition as a place for people to get involved. And that's where we have monthly meetings and we provide trainings and resources for people to come together. And so you're all invited, but like I said, I'll share info later. So, okay, so next up, we, as far as where we are, we really cannot overstate the trouble that we are in on climate change. The IPCC report said in 2018 that we had 12 years to fix the situation, but really very little has happened since then. And so now time moves on and we have 8 years to get to zero. And so we're really out of time rather for distractions and for measures that are not going to get us where we need to go. And so there's a general consensus that we are already at 1 degree Celsius warming and that we need to stay under 1.5 in order to keep humanity in this livable, delicate band that we enjoy. So this graphic shows mitigation curves, or what is possible in terms of cutting back emissions, what is required to hit that 1.5 degree world. And so you can see where we are now. Here we are, 2022. We really, this is a huge lift and is going to require a lot of change. And this does not even include committed emissions, which are like the gas car in your driveway that you're not ready to get rid of, or the gas water heater in your garage. So if we are going to achieve a climate safe future, every machine and every power plant that is replaced from here on out must be clean and all electric. So what do we do? So there are 3 fundamental truths that I want to be sure I convey to you today. One is that greenhouse gases cause climate change. Hopefully we've established that. The second is that cities cause greenhouse gases, as Linda mentioned. According to the UN, cities consume 78% of the world's energy. They produce more than 60% of GHGs, even though they make up less than 2% of the Earth's surface. But good news, you can change your city. And I'm not sure if the UN Secretary General is on the call. Please raise your hand if you are a United Nations delegate or other state or national elected official. But the reality is that it's awful hard for you or me to have an impact on national or global policy. But it's very lonely at your city hall. There are 34 cities in Orange County and 1 unincorporated county. And it's very likely that there is no one at your city asking your city to make the kinds of big scale changes that are necessary and are very much within their power. So this is big, monster sized, low hanging fruit, and it's available to you and to your city right now. So stepping back for a moment, we need to be clear that the fossil fuel economy has always required people and places to be sacrificed for profits, particularly Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And unfortunately, those who have contributed the least to the problem have always and will continue to suffer the most in the future. This map shows information from Cali, PA on what that looks like in Irvine in particular, where one of the most ethnically and racially diverse areas of the city is also the one with the highest percentile of poverty and of pollution burden. So this is just Irvine, but this is true everywhere. The best predictor of whether you live near pollution is the color of your skin. I know that Surfrider is committed to fostering a just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive organization for all people, which is wonderful. And the good news is that racial justice is climate justice, and replacing fossil fuels with clean electricity through the policies that I'm going to talk about can help reduce this pollution and correct these injustices. And that is super important. So let's talk for a moment about where emissions come from now that we have this city focus. Oh, I'm changing my slides there. Okay, so the UN says that they come from cities. Here's what Irvine says about their emissions. They say that 33% comes from transportation. We're a little skeptical of this number because this would not be normal for what we see for most cities in the region, but that's what they're saying. Okay, fine. But transportation emissions can be addressed by more bikeable, walkable neighborhoods, which is a matter of city policy, and also with electric vehicles, of course, which have gotten a lot of attention recently. And those can be supported with building electrification policies and other programs. And then you'll notice here, the biggest chunk that they say is from the community. So this is citywide from everything that happens in the city. They say that 56% comes from facilities, which is buildings. And so most of those emissions, in fact, pretty much all of those emissions can be addressed through the 2 policies that I'm going to talk about. And the first one is community choice energy, which Linda talked about a bit. And so since Linda already covered it, I'll just say that this is how it works, that the Community Choice Program, which is a local nonprofit, not-for-profit government entity comprised of the cities that participate, purchase clean electricity sources. It's delivered through your existing network over poles and wires, and then you have the experience of plugging in your refrigerator or flipping on your lights just like you always have, and your bill comes the same as it always has. So this is a very powerful policy and is kind of like a cornerstone of what can happen in any city, because it also provides funding for other climate programs. So it's very important. It's a big scale change. And so the exciting thing is that these fights are winnable and we can achieve this kind of change. And that's why we worked for 5 years to bring community choice energy to Orange County, and along with Surfrider and Climate Reality activists also who helped make that happen. Shout out to all y'all. So there is this tendency to think about, what can I do? What is my, my carbon footprint, which I want to say is an invention of the fossil fuel industry. The notion of the carbon footprint was literally invented in 2004 by British Petroleum, a fossil fuel company. But so this graphic shows the GHG impact of one person, if one person could bring community choice energy to their city, if their city was Irvine, which they can't because it'll take at least a few. But even if you move the decimal points over, like 3, or even if it's you and 1,000 of your closest friends, there's nothing else that's going to come close to it. And these are the highest sort of carbon footprint oriented things that researchers have found. Like, okay, you're serious about reducing your carbon footprint, do these things. And so this is why we need systemic change and why we can't be distracted by the small scale thinking. And so because we were able to do this in Orange County, as Linda mentioned, we now have eliminated 1.7 million metric tons of GHGs every year, which is equal to taking 364,000 cars off the road every year, or the amount of carbon stored in a forest 2.5 times the size of Yosemite National Park. So that's a very big deal. That's the kind of change that we're talking about. So, this is just the headline talking about it and showing what indeed did happen in Irvine and in those other cities. So another policy that is available to Orange County cities and that is complementary to community choice is building electrification. And I like to use this hashtag #ElectrifyOC. And so as far as why we need to do that, of course, like I said, science says we need to reach zero carbon by 2030. We need to reach negative emissions after that. And that means no more gas powered machines or power plants. We need, all clean electric machines for driving, for water heating, for space heating, and for cooking and for clothes dryers. And to do that, we have to get the gas out of the buildings. Unfortunately, buildings have a 50 to 100 year lifespan. And so we can't afford to be building any more of these buildings with these gas pipes in them. It just makes no sense. So we need policies that are going to expedite that transition. And there are numerous benefits from this in terms of our housing costs and our health and air quality, job opportunities. Clean and reliable energy is going to save us. Just energy savings alone, according to experts in the state of California, will be upwards of $2,500 a year. And so this is, and then the health benefits are also significant. And that has been underscored by some research recently. Let's cut off a bit. But so most people don't know that 90% of the natural gas that's used in your house for cooking and for heating is methane, which is a very powerful and dangerous greenhouse gas. And that warms the planet by generating carbon dioxide from when it's burned, and then also leaking unburned methane into the air. And it's a very powerful greenhouse gas, like I said. And so it's also harming our health in our homes. And this new research from Stanford University that came out in January found that gas stoves constantly leak methane and other pollution into our most used living spaces, into our kitchens, exposing us to disease triggering pollutants like around the clock. And one of the most disturbing facts that they found was that even if your stove is off, it is still leaking into your home. And in fact, that 3/4 of those emissions happen while your stove is off. And that's because the fittings and the connections of the stove leak constantly. And so this is an environmental justice issue because lower income folks are disproportionately affected because they live in smaller homes. These are just some physical realities in many cases. Smaller homes, older homes, with older pipes and fittings and inadequate ventilation. There are more people living in the home, and there's more outdoor pollution as well. And so that's why kids, the research has shown that children living in a home with a gas stove have a 42% higher risk of experiencing asthma symptoms than a kid who lives in a house with an electric stove. So how do we fix this problem? So what we need to happen is for cities to pass codes that require all new construction to be all electric, which is called a REACH code. And 54 cities in California have now adopted such measures, but none of them are in Orange County so far. So this is an exciting opportunity for climate leadership for Orange County cities. And we also need cities to adopt plans to retrofit existing buildings. And there are a lot of those, of course, starting in communities of concern to help protect these folks, and community choice programs such as the Orange County Power Authority and investor-owned utilities can create programs to subsidize those upgrades. And then the CPUC has a lot of money, more than $1 billion in funding that's available, and we need to put those funds to work for Orange County families. So that is something else we can do. So I know that this is a lot of information, and of course it can be overwhelming, but I did put together this quick to-do list for you. I will put this stuff in the chat so you can just click on it, but I want you to remember that you can change the outcome here. You can be part of the solution by changing your city and by asking for these policies. And you have special superpowers in your city because you know people and you know things that Linda and I and Dan will never know. And even though we can't change what happens at COP26 or at the United Nations, if you live in a city where you probably live in a city rather where no one is showing up to advocate for climate issues. And so you can do that. And here's my contact info. Drop me a line anytime. And that's it for me. So I'll stop my share.
Great, thank you, Ayn. And just a note to everybody: if you haven't opted in to the OC Climate Coalition group, which some chapter folk from Surfrider have, but I know we're all doing our best to stay in our lane, with our campaigns that are going on within our chapters and our other initiatives that can be overwhelming. But since this is such a long-term campaign, we really need all hands on deck. And so I never consider it, a duplication of effort to be involved with the sum total of all the above, because I'm constantly learning, from my counterparts at Climate Reality and Climate Action Campaign and Nicole down in San Diego, as well as our elected. So, opt in as much as you can if you're chapter folk, because you will learn. And, there are some times where we need to pull out all the stops at a moment's notice to show up at a council meeting or show up at an event where we're needed. And that said, I'm going to turn over the floor to Dan Kalmick, our esteemed Huntington Beach City Councilman, and who is also on the OCPA as an alternate, I believe. Is that correct, Dan?
Yes, I'm the alternate. Hopefully soon to become the primary here in the not too distant future. As Mr. Posey is termed out at the end of the year, so we'll do a transition likely before he's termed out. So we've got a little bit of continuity there. Well, thank you everyone for inviting me. My name is Dan Kalmick. I'm I guess no longer newly elected council member of Huntington Beach, but I've served just over a year now on the city council. And prior to that, I did 8 years on the planning commission. I went through a general plan update as part of that, and I've done a second one now. So really kind of snuck as much climate plan as we could into that document. It's scattered. Our city is a little elastic when it comes to climate policy. We were very early on banning plastic bags, but we were the first city to unban plastic bags in the state, which got kind of wild. So there's a unique type of environmentalist in Huntington Beach, and we definitely have to understand what that lane looks like in order to not get really far ahead and then take 10 steps back. And so we've really kind of incrementally moved the needle in Huntington Beach, I think, rather strategically over the last year and over the last couple of years to try to align ourselves with some folks who normally wouldn't be seenest of orders. And so what I was going to talk about tonight, I was kind of trying to figure out what it was going to be, and then listening to Linda and Ayn, I feel like I can kind of close the circle on this and talk about advocacy and how it affects from my side of the table. Like all of the work that you folks do is for naught if you cannot convince a majority of your council or decision makers to do what you want. And I'll tell Councilmember Posey will tell the story about Ayn, who called and lobbied him, and because Ayn was polite and thoughtful and listened and made her case, Mike changed his mind and decided to support 100% renewable. And just because just being polite to people now is the bar is low, but Ayn is quite persuasive and created the relationship. So we didn't meet a lot of you folks the day we voted, right? It's about building a longer term relationship so that when people do show up and make an ask finally, that you know that person's operating in good faith and didn't just read something on Facebook and come on down to the meeting and is shaking a fist at everybody, that it's thoughtful, it's well researched, it's coming from a spot, a place of a group of folks are there. It's not just one person with the loudest voice in the room, that there is a constituency behind it. And so I think that having working and listening, I think Ayn and Linda can teach a master class on advocacy at this point, especially in the power arena, and really telling the story. And I think there's very good juxtaposition on some folks that were advocating for CCE and against it, versus how we were successful in Huntington Beach as being one of the four cities that selected, or three cities that selected 100% renewable across the board. And it was a wild weekend. Our vote was on Tuesday, and on Friday I was in a whole different position, and had a lot of conversations with folks on trying to get there, and then realized that the position that I initially had was going to piss everybody off. And so if we were going to do something courageous, we might as well have somebody like us at the end of it. So we ended up with voting for 100% renewable, but that I think was one piece that was, I think, a lightning rod for some folks in our city. I wish that the cost was a little bit easier at this point. And again, we had it's taken so long that the cost curve has changed quite a bit. But my goal is hopefully to bring that cost curve down. And I think our pro forma showed that the cost curve for CCE, and I'm talking about Orange County Power Authority at this point, was enough that in the future, the pricing will get better, and the pricing will, I think, hopefully be parity or cheaper than Edison at some point. And I think that, we're really concerned. We have a very large environmental justice community in our city, and that happens to also cross over with our lowest income group in our city, and also our lowest voter turnout in our city. And so, we're definitely evaluating how we can not affect folks that are going to be tight on cash if we're going to raise power rates. So that was something that was really concerning to me. But I think that with an option that folks can opt out and opt down, which is really, I think, if something is so expensive that they can opt down and have parity with Edison, I thought that was a reasonable amount. But I think a lot of our folks can shoulder the burden. And I think that in order for us to meet our greenhouse gas goals and our environmental mitigation program, we had to be 100% renewable. And I think we have a problem now that we're struggling to find the 100% renewable on the grid and buy those contracts in order to meet those goals for 100% renewable. And there's some folks, we kind of have to plug our nose, and from some of the folks that are, I think, glomming on to the Power Authority, right? Poseidon came out with a 100% renewable, not even binding contract, but handshake agreement effectively for that. And so again, some of these cases, it's got to be like the least worst situation, right? If Poseidon does unfortunately get passed, then at least it will be using 100% renewable power in that case. So we tried to kind of stay silent on that and not really shake too much of the tree, because again, we're trying to meet our climate goal from one side, but obviously we don't want it to detract from the other. The LA Times had a great article on gray hydrogen and blue hydrogen a couple of weeks ago, talking about this hydrogen is going to save us all. The gas company Sempra is coming out saying it's going to save us all, but when you dig into it, you realize hydrogen is made from methane, and quite a few other things. So, in Huntington Beach, the advocacy portion has been really helpful in giving political cover for folks to make really good decisions. And it's really, as I said, it's building that longer term relationship, having those meetings, and really just advocating for what you want, and to keep advocating for what you want, but to listen and recognize you're not going to win every vote. But in the case of Councilmember Posey, he changed his mind, and that was great. And so we had a great vote on going to 100% renewable. And so, but in the meantime, we've also passed resolutions to move our entire fleet to alternative fuels and primarily electric as becomes available, which is a great strategy. And because of the chip shortage, we're actually in a situation now whereby we're going to be able to probably institute that in a much shorter timeline, because we can get so much money for our used cars. And so our used fleet, we can turn that over. Actually, we can buy cars this year, turn them over next year for exactly what we paid for them, and flip into EVs as they come online. So we can actually do kind of a pause and move forward, which would be great. Some of our heavier duty vehicles obviously are going to be a struggle. We are not going to be the first city to get electric fire engines. We're going to let LA City pilot those and see how those work first. But we do have 2 Tesla patrol cars coming in the next couple of months. That was something that I pushed for very hard to really show our cops that these things are the fastest things on the road, but also can run on electric power. And we've got 50 charging stations to support that new electric infrastructure coming in through SCE grants. So we've got, in addition to that, we have our sustainability master plan, which I think just went out to bid right now, or we just selected the bid. I can't remember where we are in that process, but that will, I think, help us drive home kind of the overarching plan and de-silo the city to say, okay, how are we going to meet these goals? And then hopefully make them legally binding, right? To say, we're going to meet these, we are going to try to meet the following goals. Here's what's reasonable. Here's what the city can do. Here are the incremental changes we can make. Electrification of the city, I think, and the electrification of our transportation is going to be incredibly important. Having that infrastructure in place, because our city has a large amount of multifamily renters. Electrification of that transportation is going to be difficult. And so what we're trying to figure out is, how do we do, if you've got a fourplex or a high density development, how do renters charge their cars? And so if it's going to be, I think, a multi-pronged approach that they can charge at their place of work, they can charge at home, but with parking minimums changing as well, like we're going to run into a situation where you may not have a parking spot where you're going to live, especially with some of the housing mandates that are coming down from the state. So there's going to be some headbutting here between how are we going to keep our transportation system intact, when, again, you have to have public transit before you can have the density kind of person, because it doesn't work the other way around. So we need to make sure that we're lobbying OCTA to make sure that they're going electric. Right now they're testing both electric and hydrogen vehicles, but what we need as decision makers are, for lack of a better term, ideas, right? We need folks to send us, hey, this is what some other cities doing. You guys should do it too. And then we can flag that to staff and say, go figure this out and do this for us. We think it's a great idea. We're basing our sustainability master plan, I believe, on Santa Clara or San Jose. Santa Clara County, I think. And so we're referencing that as, I believe, as our policy doc as we go forward. But again, we want to make sure we have everything in there that will make our city the pinnacle beach city going forward for climate action. But as I opened with, is that Huntington Beach is a unique form of environmentalism, and we have to do things for our residents, and we can't do things to our residents. Or we'll end up taking steps back. So as we frame these, it may be more expensive, but we have to do things for our residents and not to them. And so that's kind of been what sits on my dashboard as I talk about this is, we tried to ban styrofoam right after we did the plastic bags, and that was a bridge too far. And so we lost some very good environmental stewards in our city council, and we took some steps back to the point where they trashed the climate action plan. We put plastic bottles back on the dais. We just kind of did a bunch of really silly things for spite. But if we can kind of slowly, incrementally do things as a city, do things for people, if they're willing to spend the money for it, we can be very successful in that. And that's, I think, kind of my goal going forward, is to find policies and procedures that the city can implement be it organic waste disposal or electric vehicle charging. It create incentives for folks to get there, and then let them make the decision, but make the decision so obvious that it makes sense. And I think with the Power Authority, as we gain some additional dollars in the bank, we can create some of those incentives on top of what Edison offers. When we talk about electrification, I'm keeping eyes on for when the rebate shows up for the heat pump for water heater. I'm ready to get rid of my gas water heater so I can get rid of the ugly pipe that comes out the back of my house from venting of it. But that rebate has, I think, run out of money or disappeared. And so I definitely be advocating to add those back in. And I think, cooking, I think, is going to be the biggest hurdle. And I think that's going to be taking folks doing the roadshow with convection and induction electric stoves, because people like to cook with gas because they think that you can see it and all that. So we need to get chefs and restaurants showing people that you can cook with electric, and it's not any different. You just have to learn a little different. And I'm fortunate enough to have 5,000 watts of solar on the roof, 2 electric cars, and a mini split for air conditioning and high efficiency electricity. The only thing left in my house for gas is water heater, dryer, and the cooktop. So it's really something that we were, and there was financing available when I did this about 5 or 6 years ago through some of the credit unions and incentives. But as the California Public Utilities Commission starts to disincentivize some of these things at the behest of the large investor-owned utilities, this is where local control and local policies, I think, really start to play in. And I think the Power Authority is going to go through some growing pains, and I think we're going to need to really pressure the Power Authority to do the right thing and to make sure that we can bring other cities in as well, so that we can keep expanding. I didn't realize that the County of Orange actually surpasses Huntington Beach in its electricity usage. So we're not the second fiddle anymore. So we have to take a backseat to them, or we can electrify more of our grid and start using some more power. But I'm hopeful that we can get through this first year, and when we launch residential at the end of the year, it doesn't create too much of a storm. I think that there's a couple of things that fall in. Edison's credit will fall in October for climate change, and then the rate stabilization credit for time of use will also fall at the same time. And so we're not going to correct anybody if they think that's the Power Authority helping them out as those bills show up. But ideally, hopefully next year, as we purchase power again, we'll be able to use our buying power and get some lower rates, and hopefully come with parity with Edison. So I'm happy to leave open any more questions, go to the Q&A portion, and turn it back over to Denise.
Absolutely. And thank you, Dan, for your comments about, not all cities are the same. And of course, Orange County is, we are behind the 8 ball with where we are with community choice and, and of course, other environmental initiatives. And, you're exactly right. We need to work together on, when is the right timing, on these initiatives, and how to score our points in a positive way with our local city councils, because not, every city council is going to be a Laguna Beach, in terms of, always saying yes and always wanting, having that political will to be the first, to sign on to plastic bag bans or styrofoam bans, et cetera. So, all of our chapters in Orange County, we are all on the front lines with, community choice and these other initiatives. And so that's why you do have a patchwork, but now is the time, for all of our cities in Orange County to start being proactive because of the, renewables goals set by the state. So, our cities really need to up their game and think about, okay, well, 2030, 30 by 30 is going to come very quickly here in terms of planning. And, in a moment's notice, it'll be upon us. So with that, thank you to all of our panelists. We're going to stay on for a bit and open it up for questions. And so I guess the best way is just to raise your hand in the chat for me. And you can unmute yourself. I mean, we can all unmute if we have about 20 people on, including 5 of us. So would anybody like to ask a question? Let's see. Who is this? Nonverbal. Let's see. Invite. Oh, wait a minute. Why am I? Who would like? I have gone to a dark room.
I think Danny has his hand raised. I can see.
But Danny has his. Okay, thank you.
Dan, I have a question or a comment for you. I assume you could hear me, correct? Okay. You said you're going to get rid of your used vehicles and then replace them with the electric fleet, which made me think about, does anybody have any idea what the time to recycle vehicles is? Because you're just moving it from one place to another. And how fast are the vehicles going out of service? Anybody thought about that?
So we have a very large schedule. I can't speak to the recycling component to it. I can speak to where we are as a city. Like, we're not replacing good vehicles with electric vehicles for the sake of it. Like, we will incrementally as they reach their end of service for us. And we in Huntington Beach, we run the wheels off of our vehicles. Like, we're not the Orange County Fire Authority. Where if it gets a little scratch in it, well, it goes in the junk heap. We are the we've got some very, very old vehicles that we need to get off the road, and some to the point where we're spending so much money to get parts because we're hanging on to these things. So the recycling of vehicles, I think, is a whole separate conversation. But and of course, we do get kind of stuck in the, what are the greenhouse gas emissions created to create an electric vehicle and ship the parts all over the world? And I think that is definitely pushed out by the petroleum industry, who wants to keep everything together. We are trading a bit of, we are digging deep holes in the earth in order to get some of the minerals out for electric vehicles. But I think the long-term issues with that, with having to dig all of the oil out to process, refine, ship to the place, versus the power from the sun I get from my solar panels that I can charge my vehicle and run it for I don't know what the turnaround is anymore. I'm assuming it's under 5 years. But yeah, I mean, we're being very cognizant of, we're not just moving the point. And you'll hear that again, the electric vehicle folks will say, well, the power's dirty power, so it's just it's dirty power elsewhere. But again, that's the whole point of CCA, is that when my solar's not running, that the power coming off the grid is renewable. And yes, of course, those electrons aren't generated locally from renewable sources. They are providing more incentive to add more renewable sources to the grid and increasing the grid mix completely. That gets, again, some folks get a little, I think, too cute by understanding what this game is for how we generate power locally. But I think that we need to try, and our goal is to always get caught trying. And so if we can get our main transportation fleet electrified, get that producing with renewable, either locally produced renewable through solar, like we've got solar in our parking lots, we're going to add more, and we can get those vehicles, the gas vehicles, off the road. It saves us money because gas is an arm and a leg, I've heard. And it also stops the GHGs from the transportation side. So we've got some other generators and things we're going to need to look at as well throughout the city for pumping. We've got a lot of pumping stations in town. We get rid of those diesel generators and turn those over to either batteries or flywheels or we're some sort of mechanical storage or chemical storage at some point.
I just wanted to add one thing, because some of the CCAs are partnering with their cities or their counties. And for instance, in the case of Peninsula Clean Energy, they partnered with the county to install 3,500 electric car charging stations. And they're doing it in places where apartment renters can have access to it. So the county parking lot, or places where there is a lot of multifamily housing. And they can do it much cheaper than SCE is doing it. 3 times as much is what I was told, and 3 times as cheaper. So they can put in technically 3 times as many electric car chargers. And when you do that, then you're helping everyone. You're to not only get an electric car, but also to have the means to pump it while they're working all day. So the partnerships that we're seeing are incredible.
Any other questions? Go ahead and unmute yourself and just opt in if you have a question for any of our panelists.
Hi, Denise. I'm here. This is Craig.
Hi, Craig. How are you?
Good. Good to see you again. And thank
Good
you all.
to see you again, too.
I'm Craig Preston in Costa Mesa. I volunteer with CCL and other eco groups. Thank you to Linda and Ayn. I've worked with you many times, so I know the shtick and have been pushing for CCE here in Costa Mesa. Dan, you're new to me, so thanks for your efforts in Huntington Beach. And I asked a question of Mayor Fred up in Fullerton. I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but obviously we need local action. So I appreciate what Linda and Ayn are saying of cities create a lot of pollution. And so thank you for Dan for being on city council and just the courageous move. I feel for our city council members. They sign up to be yelled at least twice a month and in late night meetings. And so thank you for taking that on. But I appreciated Fred saying that he's been successful in bringing people from the far right into this conversation so we can have good policy coming out of both sides of our political spectrum by giving them choice. And it sounds like you had some good examples there of working with Councilman Posey and making it so that, as you said, we're not here to force anything on the people. We're here to serve the people. And so we'd just like to hear yours or Linda's or Ayn's perspective on pushing the needle of bringing conservatives more into this. I worked with the California GOP and work in that space and work on national policy so we can go global. And so I'm thinking all of you, I'm sure, would like a national policy too, like a price on carbon or something. But I so appreciate what you're doing locally because we need good examples of what will spread across the world. So can you speak to that, Dan?
Yeah, I try to be very, very brief. So there's some folks that are ungettable, right? They're flat earthers, sky's purple. We're never going to, the amount of remedial education from high school, from middle school, science onward is just never going to get there. But Orange County is fortunately still home to quite a few, we'll call them Reagan Republicans, small government, low tax Republicans. They're the ones that go to stuff. You see them at things, right? They're at the ACCOC events. They're at the, the League of Cities. They're the ones that participate in regional government. Those are the folks that are gettable on this. Those are the folks that you can make an economic case, a small government case, a choice case, a Sacramento's the worst and they're trying to kill us all case, that you can bring this back to your local city. And I mean, the argument for me was always, look, like, do you want to go up to Sacramento and sit through a CPUC hearing and wait for your 2 minutes to try to convince the CPUC that this rate case isn't good? Or you want to come down and yell at me for an hour or go out to lunch with me for an hour and we'll talk about what the power authority's rates are going to be, right? Like it really brought home that local control. Versus, but again, like I talked to some of our folks that have been against this from the beginning because they don't trust government, and they're the ones that are arguing like, well, it shouldn't be up to the 70U to set our rates. I'm like, we're a water utility, we set your water rates. Well, you shouldn't do that either. And it's like, okay, so they want Coca-Cola to come in and set our water rates. Like they don't believe the government. They're never going to be gettable because yes, this is more government. But the argument is choice, and that's what, ironically, that they're really interested in. And so you just try to stay on message, stay very focused, find your common ground on this, and don't get distracted, right? Like, as I just said, like, ironically, they're on choice for this, but on other issues, you may not want to have that you don't want to have a conversation about choice. You want to stay very, very, very focused, and try to bring it into something that affects them locally. I found that that's the best thing. It's like, how does this affect them personally? Their kids, their parents, their property rights going forward, and really try to message that way. Posey was against this at the beginning. I mean, he's definitely, we don't tease him for being a flip-flopper, but he's definitely against this from the beginning. But he went to the conferences, stayed with an open mind, and got to the point where, yeah, it may be a little more expensive. Yeah, climate change is real and it's going to be a problem, but this keeps us in charge and in control of the process. And we got Barbara on board too, But Barbara's, I think, less conservative in that she's in the common sense party now, so it's a little bit easier to move that. You don't have the GOP in your butt. Yeah, it's I've just found that you just being focused and being fact driven and trying to understand what your Orange County local government Republican politics are, conservative politics are, but cut loose the folks that are ungettable.
Great, thank you.
I just want to mention that, you know, I'm going to talk to whoever's in office, and I'm going to keep talking to them, and I'm going to be respectful and relentless about it. So, and what I try to do is make the case, make the argument, ask for a meeting, send an email, ask for another meeting. I might not even hear, over and over, but every once in a while I'll get a response because I sent something like on electric car charging, or like on look at this, what they're doing with this banking thing, or because they're a nonprofit, they get to apply for these energy efficiency programs. Are you going to do that? And sometimes I get a response back, and then that starts a conversation. And so for me, it's just keeping those ideas coming and hearing, like Dan said, hearing what matters to them and then sending them information about it. And I think a lot of us do that. But I think that's the best way. And we don't always agree. I ask for things I may not get, but I still ask for them. And I think it's important that anyone listening to this send a simple email and ask for what you want. So that's really important.
May I ask a question? I worked for over a year trying to get Santa Ana to look at joining the community choice energy and being part of it. And it was very difficult because the staff was wanting to go like in a different direction, and that was just not even doable for the city. And I just like to see, hear from you guys on how we can just continue to stay engaged with other cities, because we need more than 4 cities in Orange County to be part of community choice energy. And I just want to commend all of you on the power of your story and how, residents and I see a lot of people that were involved in advocating for community choice here, and also helping to get the power authority to even happen in the first place. That's been years of work, and I'm just really proud of everything that you all did. And I just want to say a shout out to Linda too, who was just nominated for Women Who Make a Difference Award as well. A lot of great leadership there, and hours to make all of this possible. And also for our city council members too. It's a lot of hard work doing, representing your city. And I'm just really proud of you as a mom too, and all the work that you've been bringing to our community. It's fantastic, and your voice and the way you present things really make a difference. So thank you to all of you. But yay! But really like to see how we can get other cities to join. I know you're very focused on yours, but if we don't get more cities, we need purchasing power to reduce the rates and for more cities to buy renewable energy.
I'm working on Seal Beach. I have Sunday dinner with their mayor, who's my father. Regularly, so I've got an inside track to them. I don't know that they're contemplating making progress, but we got to make it more saleable, right? I mean, I think that's going to be the work plan for me for this year is to polish up the marketing and make sure that we can give folks the political cover to effectively raise rates, right? Like that, nobody wants to do that, but we do need to show that you legally have to do this. It's in your general plan. Or it's in your environmental documents or whatever, but like we need to give them the cover so they can say with a straight face, we have to do this, folks. This is A, going to save the planet, B is going to help us meet our goals, and C is the right thing to do, but in some sort of order and whatever speak that has to be for their city. And I know I've talked to some of the council members in Santa Ana as well, and that's going to take relentless, respectful, relentless persistence to get us there. And I think that they will. I think again, it may take an election or two to get some more folks on board, but I think South County cities may be a little bit easier to get to, but we need to bring in again, I think the Power Authority needs to get through a year, I think, before some folks really start to get into that. But again, just laying that groundwork, keep talking about it, stay in their ear, sending them articles that are favorable about what CCEs are doing. And hey, look at these cool programs. I mean, earmarks came back federally this year, right? Like the Power Authority can become its own earmark system for projects in communities. And so we can sell it as, look, we're going to take that, we're going to plow it back into jobs in your community and this. And so that small cup of coffee a month, an increase in power could create new industry in your city. So I think it's going to be just trying to check a bunch of boxes and just stay with folks on it. And I think eventually we'll have the whole county. But the first launch year is always, that's the risk takers right there.
Yeah.
And then the drowning out some of the garbage noise, and I think Linda and I have been great with that, is you will get the large advocacy against and all of the misinformation about how this is going to be. I mean, I'm under recall right now, partly because of this. They're still counting signatures at the registrar of voters, which they will fail on the recall. But part of their argument against is that we took on $580 million in direct debt to the city, which is inaccurate. But folks will read that, and it kind of passes a smell test sometimes. But it's we just need to make sure we've got our ducks in a row. We're giving our decision makers cover. So I mean, we got the county, which was wild, but that came on, so that's great. And hopefully we can bring on Laguna and some of the South County cities, and Anaheim's its own public utility, so they're not coming. But we just need to keep moving.
Absolutely. And keep the dialogue going so that we know if there's a city, like if you're meeting with Seal Beach, we can reach out to residents so that we can help talk to our neighbors and provide the information of why it works, why choice works, and the power of their choice.
I just want to throw out educating city staff is so important, because as somebody who's tried for the last 5 years to get my city on board in Costa Mesa, and running into in my opinion, that's been a major problem. And you need some people, internal staff that that help with that sometimes. And I'm shout out to Antonia Graham, because you cannot not say her name and think about the fact she had a lot to do with Huntington Beach and Fullerton, and support and advocating for that. And on that note, I respectfully relentlessly ask what her replacement is going to look like and when that's going to be addressed. And because I think that somebody needs to fill her role in OC Power Authority who sort of represents that knowledge of sustainability and moving forward, and be in a place of autonomy where she can make things happen, like the energy efficiency programs she applied for that we're going to roll out with the 4 cities. And I did just ask about that, and they said that's still on the table, but I think they need someone to really follow through with that and make it happen. So.
Hey, great. So Linda, we have one person with his hand up, Amir. Amir, you have a question, and that'll be the last question and the conclusion of the meeting tonight. We've gone a little bit over, but I really appreciate everybody's busy schedule taking the time with us. So Amir, you have the floor.
But
there you are.
One question I have is, in terms of the urgency of the problem and communicating that clearly to city councils, I feel like oftentimes it goes one year and out the other, even if you build relationships and you're trying to push for that. So like, and also for getting more people to show up, like, whether it's the Fridays for Our Future or whatever it might be. So like, are there any like best practices to like get city council members to prioritize it higher, to see that it's affecting people in Orange County more? Because it doesn't seem like it's even on the radar of most city councils to even having, an urgency to solve it immediately. They think it could be wait, but when we only have 8 years, so how do we emphasize that while at the same time being respectful of their stance while ensuring that we have good progress towards our goals? Because it doesn't seem like it comes fast enough usually.
So $6 a gallon gas, I think a good spot to start. Their residents are going to start complaining about that real quick. $6 a gallon gas for city vehicles is also going to start putting a big hole in budgets, which means they're going to have to start cutting services. And the second you start doing that, torches and pitchforks come out. So there's a carrot and stick factor, I'd say, which would be something to discuss. But again, I think you got to find the basis. Do they believe climate change is real and happening and man-made? And if you're not there, that's a whole different conversation. If they're there, and then you're just talking about reprioritization, then you can start talking about, that's where you go through your flip book, right? Here are food riots. Here's what your city looks like in 10 years. Now, and articulating that sea level rise for a city like mine, right? My residents, you talk to average person on the street, they think sea level rise is there's 2 feet of water all the way down Main Street, 24, it's water world, right? No, it's 3 floods on PCH in January now that closed the street, and now they got traffic coming down their street down Warner, right? It's Sunset Beach flooded twice a year. It's more often flooding and inconvenience at the short-term scale. Longer-term scale, we're in boats, but I think it's really understanding the infrastructure costs and what we're doing locally, and that they can move the needle. A lot of folks I think feel overwhelmed, but from a policymaker standpoint, it's the faster we get off foreign oil, the faster that folks aren't being gouged for $6 a gallon gas, right? The faster we can electrify, the cheaper we can make people. We can basically, I call it a tax cut, right? We don't really tax our residents that with much because of Prop 13, or a lot of cities just don't have sales tax on top. But we can give money back to folks by creating larger scales of our economies of scale to reduce rates. And so that's kind of, I feel like we can address it at least at the hyper local level. But I think now you can kind of say look, we are experiencing, it's March and it's 80 degrees outside. It was January and it was 80 degrees outside. I think as Ayn or Linda said that it was 80 degrees hotter than normal in both the North and South Pole. You can sail across the Arctic right now. Show them the video. There's a webcam on the North. There's a buoy in the North Pole that's got a webcam, and you can see that it's floating. It should not be floating. It should be encased in ice. And so some of the, again, it's going to be person by person, but at the local level, it's money. I mean, perfectly honest, most of the local budgets, other than fortunately Huntington Beach, who has a budget surplus now, are in situations where they're counting pennies, and climate is going to absolutely destroy their budgets. And if they can get ahead of the game and get of the millions and billions of dollars that are coming down the pike for projects, sign up for it, get on board, become a member, evangelicalize your community and your council about it. And we're rolling downhill right at this point in Huntington. We're doing great. Now we got an election coming up with 4 seats in November, which could change the majority. But at this point, we are trying to lock as much stuff in so it becomes cost prohibitive to get out of. But that's my advice, at least. And I don't mean to be long-winded. I apologize.
And I would add, of course, with any audience, you want to appeal to their existing values. And so you can figure out what their existing values are by cyber stalking them and checking them out on social media, seeing where they go, who they're friends with, what kind of events they go to, and then hit them right there with whatever it is. If they care about kids, if they care about, everybody cares about their health, you would think. And climate change is, and concern about it is relatively mainstream. Like Dan said, there are some people who you just won't get, flat earthers, but we don't waste our time with those people because they are a very small minority. But, in some cases, you might have to work it out in an election if that decision maker just isn't what you need. But that's a whole other conversation. But most people, we've always had, in recent memory, we've had unanimous votes in Irvine. Just because I think even before the political demographic shifted. And so that is because they have seen there's a lot of popular support for the issue. So it's about building community, I think, and finding allies in your city, finding other people who care, being visible, just talking about it goes a long way toward connecting you with other people who are going to care about it. Because how would anyone know if you don't talk about it, especially in your own city? So, so those are some of the things I would suggest.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in on our chapter meeting for this March. And we look forward to working with all of you, just connecting on community choice energy, and everyone who's on the call. Feel free to connect with the groups in the chat. And we taped the meeting, so we will make it available through our Surfrider chapters and also through the speakers who were on the call tonight and to the Zoom. But thank you so much and have a great evening, everybody.